Hi, and welcome to this live reading from House of Arsceneaux by Caterina Novelliere, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Caitlin DeDanann. The secretary spotted Caitlin coming through the office door. "Sean's looking for you." Hearing the principal of the firm was already looking for her, Caitlin groaned. She came in early to get some work done, not to sit in another boring impromptu staff meeting. "Tell him I won't be in for another hour as I have a dentist appointment or whatever type of appointment sounds believable." "Considering I am standing behind you and see you are already here, an appointment of any type isn't believable." Sean Wachu's voice came from over her shoulder. "Sean, really, do you want the Behringer report on time or not?" Caitlin turned to look up at her boss. "I can't finish writing it if you keep summoning the team for random meetings whenever you feel like it." "This will take 5 minutes of your morning." Sean gave her the "I dare you to keep arguing with me" stare all senior executives learn to master over time. "Fine." Caitlin walked into his office and sat down in one of the ugly gray desk chairs in front of a black desk. She never understood why Sean decorated his office in such sterile contemporary colors. He was one of the top attorneys in Virginia. His clothing, home, and cars were all classic and timeless in design. His home had an inviting old-world Tuscan feel to it. His car was foreign, with a horse logo on the hood. It had black leather seats and wood trim. Every suit he wore was custom-made in a classic cut, and his high-end, wing-tipped dress shoes always gleamed from a fresh coat of shoe polish. Nothing about him matched this ridiculously modern office in cold tones. It reminded Caitlin of military ships or some weird hospital laboratory room. Maybe he let some interior designer girlfriend riding the boring trend of grays and whites design the space. The click of the door closing stopped her contemplations. "Caitlin, I have a high-profile client coming in today at 10. I'd like you to sit in on that meeting. If all goes well with it, you'll be the lead investigator assigned to the account," Sean said, settling himself into his desk chair. "Okay, that's 2 hours from now and something you could have told me without requesting a meeting." Caitlin doubted that was the reason he called her into his office. Sean let out a cross between a breath and a His mouth momentarily shrunk to a small tight line before relaxing again. "I know we've put a lot on your plate lately, and I understand you're trying to wrap up several things before you go on vacation." Caitlin recognized when Sean was dancing around an issue. "You didn't call me in here to talk about work, did you?" A sheepish grin tweaked his lips. It didn't quite reach the pale blue eyes of the man who sat back and folded his hands in his lap. "Your grandmother wants you to visit her in England next month." Caitlin shook her head. She should have guessed by Sean's demeanor that the meeting was more personal in nature than professional. "And why are you the one relaying the visitation request?" "Because you've been ignoring her calls and emails." "So I'm just supposed to drop everything going on in life for dear old Graham, who suddenly wants to spend time with her granddaughter after ignoring her for the past 20 years or so?" "Caitlin, it's complicated. She hasn't been ignoring you." Sean ran a hand through his graying dark hair. "Before you say it, I know how you feel about it, but she's still your grandmother." I have a report to write." Caitlin stood and reached for her briefcase. "Caitlin DeDanann, the report can wait. Sit back down." The scolding tone caused Caitlin to quickly take her seat again. She hated that even in her 30s, the little girl in her would quickly do as told anytime Sean's voice took on an angry fatherly tone. "When your parents died, I promised your grandmother I'd look after you, and I have. I love you like a daughter, Kate. You're also one of my top investigators and project managers. But there are days that Irish temper and stubborn streak of yours tries every ounce of patience I have. Please call your grandmother when you get a chance today. Hear her out, and then let me know if you need some time off." "Fine, I'll call her after our 10 o'clock. Caitlin picked up her briefcase and laptop bag. "I need a cup of coffee with how late I was up working on the Behringer report last night, since I'm learning to play analyst on top of everything else. Can I get you anything from Amici's?" "No, I'm good. And thank you for agreeing to call your grandmother. I'll see you in the conference room at 9:55. Don't be late." Sean watched her leave his office before looking at his computer screen. "That went shorter than I expected, and there was no bloodshed. Esther, Sean's secretary, said, seeing Caitlin come out of the office. "Oh, I won't forget that you knew why he was looking for me and didn't warn me," Caitlin joked with her. She and Esther had become pretty good friends since she was hired 4 years ago. "If he hadn't come up right behind you, I would have covered for you. Everything okay with your grandmother? She called here a little after 7 a.m. "She's fine. She's just mad I didn't drop everything I'm doing to call her back right away. I swear, you'd think she was the Queen of England at times with how she acts. Bossy and mean old lady." Deciding to quickly check email before going to the coffee shop, Caitlin logged on to her computer. Checking her email turned into just proofreading a paragraph or two of the Behringer report. Glancing down at her watch, the realization an hour had passed and she was running out of time to get coffee before the 10 a.m. meeting prompted Caitlin to lock her computer and grab her purse. She walked down the street to Amici's to get a cappuccino. Not a fan of American coffee, she had been delighted to learn Amici's, a small Italian chain with her favorite brand of espresso, was opening in Merchant Square. The spring morning air was cool and crisp, but the morning shining overhead warned the day would eventually warm up into the 70s. Spring in Williamsburg meant a mix of flowers, sunshine, and rain. The commercial area alongside Colonial Williamsburg was just starting to come to life at 9 a.m., as William and Mary students headed to another local coffee shop and tourists wandered the small square in search of breakfast. Amici's wasn't super busy, but it didn't take long for that to quickly change. After placing her order, Caitlin waited patiently by a wooden bar toward the center of the shop for her go-to order. She listened to the conversations occurring around her as the barista made the espresso machine whirl and hiss, cranking out espressos and other caffeinated beverages to energize customers for the day. A crabby old grandmother in a nearby booth told who Caitlin assumed was her grandson, "People come to Williamsburg to die. A young person should head to New York or some other big city than retire in Williamsburg." A look of shock covered the boy's face as he muttered, "That's morbid." Then he looked over at his mom with an expression that clearly said, "Do we have to spend all day with this cantankerous old woman?" Caitlin chuckled at the exchange. She empathized with the boy. Her conversation with her grandmother later would probably take on a similar tone, or she'd get some lecture about family legacy and duty. "Caitlin!" The barista called her name, setting her cappuccino on the counter and disrupting Caitlin's thoughts. Caitlin picked it up, stirred in one packet of sugar, then started to walk to the door with a lid in her hand. One of the customers waiting in line turned as she passed him, bumping into her and sending her coffee soaring upward out of the cup. "Mi scusi, signora," a baritone voice apologized as a hand settled over Caitlin's. Amber-colored eyes met hers before Caitlin instinctively arched back to prevent the mini tidal wave of cappuccino from traveling down her white blouse. The loud buzz of the coffee shop disappeared. Things blurred around her. The only items sharply in focus now were the man who bumped into her, her coffee, and herself. A fleeting sting on her chest made Caitlin gasp. Her hand shifted upward and closer to her chest as if the man magically guided her cup to recapture the suspended arch of coffee coming straight toward her. Time unfroze once the cup was safely repositioned. Most of the latte-tinted projectiles threatening to destroy her favorite shirt fell harmlessly back into the cup, except for one large blob which made her pointer finger around this cup sticky. The noise in the room returned, along with the hustle and bustle of patrons drifting in and out of the shop once their preferred beverage of choice had been obtained. Amber Eyes apologized again for bumping into her, this time in English. "I am so sorry. I didn't see you there." Weirdly enough, only a small amount of foamed milk and espresso splattered on the crisp white material of her shirt, leaving behind a circular patch of tan freckling. Caitlin used the napkin she had grabbed to try to clean off the coffee's slowly traveling woven fibers. "No, I should have put the lid on it first. I was in a hurry and haven't ever had anyone bump into me before." The stubborn stains wouldn't come off her shirt. Great. Now she'd look like a slob who can't drink without spilling on herself in front of the client Sean was worried about impressing. She softly swore under her breath. "I will pay to have your shirt cleaned. Here, buy yourself a new one on me." The Italian gentleman handed her a $50 bill. "You don't need to." Caitlin looked up at the man after he gently took her hand. A zap of electricity traveled between them. Where in the heck had that come from? If he experienced the same thing, he certainly didn't act like it. He didn't even flinch. "No, Cara, I most certainly need to right the wrong I caused." The man closed her fingers around the bill he set in her palm. "A jewel like yourself should never be in a tarnished setting." "What?" She started to ask him what type of cheesy pickup line book he had read to utter some crap like that, but the retort caught in her throat. Now that she wasn't focused on her shirt, she took in his appearance. Damn, he was gorgeous. Almost unearthly good-looking with the chiseled features of his face, his styled dark hair, and those stunning eyes and their odd shade of citrine. His equally hot ebony-haired and blue-eyed companion stared at them with a raised brow. Both men looked like they had just stepped off a page in a fashion magazine, modeling the latest bespoke suits for the year. Blue Eyes suddenly chuckled, then spoke, an elegant British accent tinged a deep, almost velvety voice. Take the cash. He's got plenty of it, and as he more elegantly stated, you don't want to go back to work in a stained shirt, especially if you have any important meetings to attend. Well, I do have a few of those today. Caitlin looked at the blue-eyed Brit for a second longer, then returned her attention to the Italian. Speaking of which, I need to get going. Grazie for the new shirt. De nulla, cara, the Italian responded, raking his eyes over her before she turned away. The two men watched her walk out the front door. While the Italian looking her over annoyed her, that their continuing to stare as she left didn't. People blatantly stared at her all the time due to the unique shade of her eyes. Most excused their doing so by claiming they were trying to figure out if she had contacts in or if her eyes were naturally that color. God, the universe, or whatever thing you believe in, must have been in a creative mood the day she was conceived. She had long flame-red hair with bright lavender eyes. Needing to try and find a shop that might have staff in early to get a new shirt before her meeting in a half hour, she hurried across the square to one of the clothing shops. Thankfully, the manager answered when she lightly knocked on the door. Taking mercy on her, the manager let Caitlin in to buy a new shirt. Caitlin ran back to the office. She had 1 minute to get into the conference room before Sean would be lecturing her about being on time. Stupid, sun-kissed Italian model guy had to bump into her and spill her coffee. This morning was not off to a good start at all between a ruined shirt and her grandmother. Hopefully, the day would get better. Hester took her purse and the bag holding her old shirt from her and then handed her a pen and notepad. Caitlin could see Sean speaking with two gentlemen whose backs were to the conference room window. Thank you, Esther. Anytime. Now hurry up and get in there. All three men stopped talking as Caitlin shut the conference room door. You, Caitlin blurted, recognizing the Italian from the coffee shop. He arched a dark brow and offered her a charming smile in response to her loud you. Sean politely stood to introduce her. He let the you slide rather than inquire about it. Gentlemen, this is Caitlin DeDanann. She's one of our top investigators and analysts. I've asked her to join us as she will be assisting me with your research into the Louisiana shipping. And Caitlin, this is Dante Giovanni and Rain Warwick. Caitlin politely shook Dante's, then Rain's hands before sitting in the empty chair in between Sean and Dante. We met at Amici's. Sean gave the three of them a puzzled look. Oh? Rain smiled. We went there for coffee after driving down here from the Richmond airport as we didn't want to impose on you or your staff. We needed to re-energize with taking an early morning flight from New York. Pleasure to meet you, Miss DeDanann. Sean, you were saying our offer should be at least in the $3 million range. That seems high for such a small company buyout. Linyapi Shipping and Ag is easily worth that. Truthfully, you'd probably be lowballing with making that as an initial offer, but it would prompt Arsceneaux to give us some idea of what he might sell for. Throughout the meeting, something about Dante irked Caitlin. She couldn't put her finger on what it was. The man was polite, with perfectly polished manners and clearly knowledgeable in the business world. Maybe she was just pissed about her shirt. It was her favorite blouse, which was most likely brown speckled for eternity now. Every time she looked over at Dante, he'd offer her a warm smile. Her pen tapped against the table, causing Sean to glance over at her a few times as they went over the proposed initial offer contract. It would be ideal if someone could conduct an on-site inspection of the company assets and speak with Arsceneaux. We haven't been able to successfully get in touch with him. Rain suggested, not thrilled with making any higher an offer without having better insight into Linyape's current value and portfolio. The company offices are in New Orleans. We can hire someone local that your firm trusts to go do an audit and inspection. Sean looked over at Caitlin with a thoughtful expression on his face. Caitlin is headed to New Orleans next week. Caitlin's face flushed a bright shade of red. Don't even suggest it, Sean. It would only take you a half a day to accommodate Mr. Warwick and Mr. Giovanni's request. Oh, because Mr. Italian underwear model and Lord British GQ come in here waving a large sum of money under your nose, I'm supposed to give up vacation time to dig into a company these two are only thinking of buying? Caitlin snapped. Now today officially sucked with 3 bad things occurring. Well, at least all 3 got knocked out before noon. Didn't the old wives' tale claim bad things only happen in 3? Rain and Dante exchanged glances. Surprisingly, grins covered their faces, almost as if they found things amusing. Caitlin recognized the "I'm going to strangle you the second this is over" tension and forced smile on Sean's face. If you'll excuse us, gentlemen, Caitlin, may I speak to you in the hall for a moment? Sean politely asked, taking Caitlin by the arm. Of course, Sean. She stood up. He'd more than likely rip her out of her chair if she didn't, then followed him into the reception area outside the conference room. I don't want to hear about business etiquette. I'm a field employee and shouldn't be in these types of meetings anyway. I'll address your mouth later. The more pressing issue at the moment is the audit and field inspection. You're the best person to do it. Hire someone else. It's only half a day, Caitlin. You know damn well it will turn into more than that. A site inspection, an operational audit, and full background review into a privately held, mid-sized international company will take at least a week. And I'm not giving up my vacation time. Not this time, Sean. How about a compromise? I'll pay for an extra week of hotel and any fees the airline charges for changing your departure date if you handle the site visit. Caitlin exasperatedly sighed. No, I work to live, not live to work. I left adjusting and litigation because I got tired of the long hours and having no life, along with constantly being on call. You aren't giving up any time off. I'm asking you to delay your vacation for a few days on my dime. It's not costing you anything. Additionally, it's cheaper for the firm to pay for the 1 week of hotel, your salary, and airfare fees than to hire an independent party to handle this. Caitlin knew he'd continue harassing her until she said yes. Throw in a first-class upgrade and dinner at Masquerades, and you have yourself a deal. Done. And I get to pick the hotel for the extra week. I'm not staying in some cheap roach motel in a seedy part of town in the interest of cost savings. Stay wherever you like as long as it's reasonable. And before you get any ideas, the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton is not in any way, shape, or form reasonable. Presidential suite at the Ponchler Terrain is then, Caitlin goaded Sean. You're fired if I see that come across on your corporate card and expense report. Caitlin's jaw dropped in mock horror. Oh no, anything but that. And you wouldn't dare, as you'd be the one having to visit dear old Graham to explain why you canned me. Sean rolled his eyes. Do we have an agreement? We need to get back in the room and finish the contract review. We do. I also expect you to apologize for the GQ and underwear model remark before our 2 clients leave today. I'm sure they've heard similar comments before. Caitlin. Sean decided it best not to finish the remark. She was already in a bad mood, and clearly something happened at Amici's with her visceral reaction to Dante. It would mean a lot to me if you would swallow your pride this once and apologize. I'll think about it. Sean held open the door for her, then swung his hand, encouraging her to go in. Is everything okay, Bella? Dante inquired as Caitlin and Sean walked back into the room. Fine, and please don't address me as Bella. It's Miss DeDanann, Mr. Giovanni. Other women may find that charming. I don't. My apologies, Rosso. Dante leaned closer to her with a come-hither grin on his face. The new shirt is lovely on you, and the deeper neckline allows the pendant you wear to shine versus hiding it. His eyes drifted down to her chest. Perhaps men should bump into you with coffee more often. Caitlin let out a disgusted gasp. He wasn't looking at her pendant. My pendant isn't anything you'll get to admire, Mr. Giovanni. Sean, I have a 10:30, so I'll let you wrap this up. She didn't wait for Sean to acknowledge her. Annoyed, she left the conference room. Screw apologizing to the lecherous jerk, even if he was good-looking. Esther looked at Caitlin and fanned herself, mouthing the words. Those 2 are fine. They may look like sex on a stick, Esther, but they're both assholes. Don't be fooled by the pretty packaging. Caitlin said as the room door was still closing. She didn't care if Sean and his 2 clients heard her. Dante loudly laughed as the door finally clicked shut while Sean looked up at the ceiling, praying for the strength not to murder the woman he promised to look after when her grandmother asked him to. She hasn't changed a bit, Rain remarked, watching Caitlin disappear behind a row of cubicles. Sean shook his head. Still mouthy and headstrong, like always. Dante found it odd that nothing about him or Rain seemed familiar to her. Does she not remember anything? Based on her reaction to you in the coffee shop and here, I would say subconsciously she recalls exactly who you are. Rain struggled to resist the urge to chuckle. Dante snorted. She's only mad I spilled her coffee on her. You did what? No wonder she's pissed. You ruined her favorite shirt. Sean pinched the bridge of his nose. Things definitely weren't going as originally planned today. It was an accident. I turned, bumping into her, and she didn't have the lid on her cup. Dante doubted the coffee incident was that big a deal. She should be thanking me and singing my praises as I prevented a larger mess by shifting her cup to catch the wayward coffee. The shirt only got a few drops on it. They will more than likely wash out. I would say she isn't doing so as she followed up the noble gesture with looking her up and down like a piece of meat. You're supposed to be a savvy businessman, Giovanni. They don't behave that way. Rain grinned the entire time he spoke. The idea of Dante being business savvy was comical. Sean glared over at Dante. Jesus, you did what on top of the remarks? Dante shrugged. It was harmless flirtation. No need to get all protective of the woman. Watch us. I told Morrigan you were the wrong one to choose for this. Listen to Rain here and learn what it is and isn't proper business etiquette in the 21st century before our next meeting, and before I'm trying to talk Caitlin out of either stabbing you with her pen or filing a sexual harassment suit against you. Sean left the conference room.